Hello, phenomenal story lovers. Get ready for a tale so raw, so emotional. It will redefine everything you thought you knew about healing and second chances. This story will make you believe in the impossible. Before we dive into this gripping narrative, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. And if you believe that even the deepest wounds can heal with the right touch, smash that like button and subscribe for more powerful, life-changing stories. Your engagement fuels our work. They fought. They hurt each other. They signed the divorce papers. For him, it was the end. 2 weeks later, a piece of news leaked. She was pregnant. He went after her, and from her lips, he heard what he feared most. There's no baby anymore. 7 months passed, and then he saw her. Her belly spoke what her eyes could not hide. Now he needed to know. Had she lied? Or had fate decided to reclaim everything? Isabella leaned her forehead against the cold glass of the living room, the steam of her breaths slowly fogging the pain in front of her. Outside, night fell heavy over London, as if the entire sky had decided to weep with her. The silence of the apartment was so dense, it ached in her chest. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the kind of silence that screams, that insults, that grinds into the walls everything that was once shouts, laughter, desire, threats. There, where the carpet still bore wine stains from the last happy dinner, where photos had been ripped from the shelf, leaving pale squares on the dark wood, there, his scent still lingered. And that was what hurt the most. Arthur had left that afternoon, not like a man losing the woman he loves, but like someone who, deep down, already knew he had destroyed everything with his own hands. They were intensity in its purest form. In an unhealthy way, perhaps. They loved with the same fury with which they wounded each other. They spoke as if there was only one volume, loud, and they touched as if the world would end in the next instant. And for a time, it was intoxicating. It was what made them feel alive, unique, irreplaceable. But then, it became war. Isabella walked down the hallway, like someone traversing an abandoned battlefield. The lamp was still overturned on the corner table. His shirt, thrown over the back of the sofa, seemed to mock her. And on the floor, near the bedroom door, a torn piece of paper, the draft of a letter he tried to write, but didn't have the courage to finish. She didn't read it. She didn't need to. Because his eyes, that morning, said it all. There was no longer a struggle, only resignation, a type of exhaustion that comes after the last hope has faded. And the cruelest part was knowing that she, too, no longer had the strength to try to understand, to forgive, or to rebuild. But that doesn't erase. It doesn't erase the night before, the discovery. Isabella never forgot the sound of the notification. It was a mundane, almost ridiculous noise, coming from his forgotten phone in the kitchen. But the name that appeared on the screen, that name she had seen once before in a poorly explained conversation, made her blood run cold. She didn't want to open it. She wished she had been one of those women who choose not to see, who prefer the comfort of doubt to the pain of certainty. But she opened it, and there it was, the simple, stupid, dirty message. Still thinking about last night? I am. A lot. It was like being punched in the stomach and feeling her legs give way. The rage came next. That kind of fury that isn't screamed, that is swallowed, that poisons. She stood there with the phone in her hand for seconds that felt like an eternity. And when he appeared in the doorway, towel over his shoulders and hair wet, time stopped. "What's wrong?" he asked, his face confused, tired. She said nothing. She just extended the phone to him. He looked, and there, in that instant, Their world ended. There was no scandal, no scene. The silence this time said it all. He tried to speak. He began to stammer explanations, clumsy justifications, but her voice cut him short. "No, don't say anything to me. Just leave." Her voice didn't tremble. It was an order that came from a place he didn't know in her. A place that was born in that second. The place of someone who decided to stop dying for others. Arthur didn't insist. Because he knew. He knew it wasn't a common mistake, not a silly oversight. It was the final drop in a glass that had been overflowing for months. They argued about everything. About nothing. About a tone of voice. About messages read and not replied to. About the way she fell silent. About the way he always tried to win an argument instead of understanding what caused it. Deep down, they weren't bad people. They were just tired of trying to fit into a love that had already become armor. One protected oneself from the other. One hurt so as not to be hurt. But even so, it hurt. Because there was love there, and true love. Isabella sat on the kitchen floor, leaning against the fridge, and cried. She cried as she hadn't since her mother's death. She cried as if she were burying a part of herself, because it was exactly that, the part of her that believed, that still hoped, that still wanted it to work. Arthur left the keys on the counter before leaving. It was the only sound he made. Isabella didn't follow him. She didn't beg. She didn't scream after him. She just closed the door with a trembling hand and leaned her forehead against it. She stayed like that for a time she couldn't measure. Then, she collapsed onto the floor. The following week, the divorce papers arrived. No lawyers fighting, no property dispute. Just 2 cold signatures on papers that smelled of notary offices, not memories. She signed with a steady hand. He, with his gaze lowered. "Forgive me," he murmured, handing her back the pen. She looked at him as one looks at someone who has already died, and said nothing. There was no forgiveness, no justice, only ruins. And now, there, alone in that apartment that was once a home and became a mausoleum, Isabella wondered when it all began to die. If it was the first time he made her feel small, if it was when she started hiding her tears in the bathroom, or if it was in that stolen kiss with another woman on some ordinary night in which Arthur traded truth for cowardice. But the answer no longer mattered. What remained now was an emptiness full of echoes, and a silence that would not let her forget. Arthur walked the streets of the neighborhood like someone searching for a version of himself he had lost along the way. Every step was another fragment of what he was, or thought he was. Guilt didn't hit him like a direct blow. It slid in slowly, insidiously, clinging to his bones and stealing his breath. It was a Tuesday when the news arrived. Unexpected, cold, like all those things that change everything without asking permission. It was late afternoon, when he was still trying to get used to the solitude of the empty apartment, that the phone rang. It was his sister, with the hesitant voice of someone carrying a secret they don't want to keep. "Leo, I ran into Emily today. Do you remember her? The receptionist from Dr. Thompson's clinic?" she said. "I remember," he replied, without any real interest. She mentioned something strange. She said she saw Isabella there, 2 weeks ago at the obstetrics clinic. Arthur stopped breathing for a second. The sound of the world was swallowed by a dull hum. Everything became distant, impossible, irrational. What? She didn't know anything. She only mentioned it because she found it curious. "I thought you should know." He hung up without saying goodbye. He didn't need to think. His body acted before his mind. He got in the car, drove aimlessly, as if instinct could guide him to her. He didn't know where she was, but he knew he needed to see her, that he needed to confirm, to understand, to plead, anything, to pull him out of that abyss where only unanswered questions resided. He called, once, twice, 5 times. No answer. He went to the house where she lived. Closed. Silent. Neighbors hadn't seen her for days. He tried the coffee shop where she worked. She had already quit. Her best friend's number? Disconnected. Social media? Deleted. It was as if she had been erased from the world. That night, he didn't sleep. He imagined all the possibilities. He tried to remember if there had been any sign, any clue left by accident, but everything in him was a fog. He could only think of one thing. She was pregnant, and he didn't know it. Or worse, she didn't want him to know it. 2 days later, finally, she replied. He recognized the old number she used only for emergency calls, and before she even said anything, he was already crumbling inside. Isabella. His voice came out more like a cry for help than a call. Why are you calling me? She was cold, objective, a stranger. I found out. I found out about the consultation. He couldn't finish. Silence on the other end. A silence that wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a warning. It doesn't matter anymore, Arthur. I lost the baby. The phrase fell like a sentence. Sharp, surgical, deadly. He didn't react. The world stopped for an instant, but his heart didn't. His heart imploded, because there was something in her voice that didn't fit, something dissonant. Are you sure? She didn't reply immediately, and that pause, that hesitation, screamed louder than any word. Yes, and it doesn't change anything. It would have just been another thing we were going to ruin. And then, she hung up. He tried to call again, to plead, to shout, to ask for explanations, but she didn't answer anymore. And after that, he never managed to talk to her again. In the days that followed, Arthur sank into a toxic mixture of guilt and doubt. The idea of a child, his, theirs, and that now no longer existed, was unbearable. There was rage, a lot of it, but not towards her, towards himself, for the mistake, for the betrayal, for not having perceived it sooner, for not having been the man she needed, deserved. And at the same time, something in him refused to believe it entirely. The way she said it, the coldness, the pause before the answer. That wasn't grief. It was something darker. It was a shield. Isabella had lied, but not out of cruelty. She lied for protection, because the fear she felt was greater than any wound. She knew that if she told the truth, he would try to come back, that he would use the pregnancy as an excuse to start over. And she didn't want to start over with the same broken pieces. She had looked him in the eye on the day of the divorce signing and didn't see enough repentance. She saw pain, she saw sadness, but she didn't see change. And raising a child next to someone she could no longer trust would be a second destruction. Not just hers, but of someone too innocent. So she lied, because it was safer to leave Arthur buried in the past than to risk giving her baby to an uncertain future. She disappeared. She moved cities. She deactivated everything. She started from scratch, carrying a belly that grew with time and a heart that broke in silence. Arthur, trapped in the same apartment where their love was born and died, paced in circles, obsessed with answers, with the why, with the doubt that gnawed at him. What if she lied? What if there was a baby growing somewhere, with his face, her eyes, and he didn't know it? But no matter how hard he tried, she left no traces. And so, 2 worlds violently separated. One, seeking redemption. The other, just survival. Isabella arrived in Brighton with her soul in ruins and her body carrying more than just memories. The bus parked at the terminal at 3:20 a.m. on a damp, salty night. The nearby sea breathed heavily, and the wind blowing through the still empty avenues seemed to whisper secrets she no longer wanted to hear. Charlotte was waiting for her, leaning against a pillar with her arms crossed and eyes full of tears. They hadn't seen each other in almost a year, but pain needs no introductions. Isabella got off the bus without a large suitcase, just a backpack, a blanket in her arms, and exhaustion clinging to her skin. Charlotte ran to her, wrapping her in a quick, dry hug, as if fearing that more than that could shatter the little that remained firm in her friend. "Are you hungry?" she asked, breaking the silence like someone fumbling in the dark. Isabella shook her head. Her eyes were downcast, her shoulders heavy, and even in silence, it said everything. "Then let's go home. We'll talk there or not." Charlotte's apartment was small, with flaking walls and second-hand furniture, but it had something rare: peace. And for Isabella, at that moment, that was worth more than any comfort. The next few days passed slowly, as if time was ashamed to move forward. Charlotte, careful, didn't ask too many questions. She just made soup, arranged pillows, and occasionally left a chamomile tea by the bed. It was only on the third night that Isabella spoke. "I lied to him," she said, her voice hoarse from hours of silence. Charlotte didn't ask who. She already knew. "I told him I lost the baby, that it didn't matter anymore." The silence that followed was the kind that protects more than any words. Charlotte didn't judge her. She took her hand, squeezed it gently, and let her continue, at her own pace. She wouldn't tolerate pity on her face. No empty promises, not after everything. "I just didn't want to keep sharing what little I had left of myself with someone who broke everything." Charlotte nodded, and in that instant they sealed the pact. The secret would be kept like a relic. Isabella started working at a modest coffee shop in the city center. It was a busy place, filled with people who passed through rather than stayed, and that was perfect. No one asked questions. No one looked twice. She wore a simple uniform, her hair tied back in a messy bun, and the name on her badge: Sarah. A small detail, but necessary. She was no longer the woman she had been. Her belly took a long time to grow, as if her own body hesitated to reveal what her heart still hid. But little by little, the uniforms tightened, the nausea became more frequent, and exhaustion filled the space between double shifts. Charlotte accompanied her to appointments whenever she could. It was she who read the reports, who held Isabella's trembling hands during ultrasounds, who listened to the heartbeat with tear-filled eyes. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," she said once on the way home. Isabella didn't reply. She didn't know if she believed that. Sometimes, she looked in the mirror and saw a body carrying a life, but a soul that was still dying inside. She knew she needed to be strong, but she couldn't help dreaming of Arthur. Dreams in which he caressed her belly, smiled, cried, and then she would wake up with the taste of blood in her mouth and a loneliness that ached in her bones. Sometimes she would go to the beach at dawn. She would sit on the sand, the wind blowing hard, and cry with her face turned towards the sea. She wondered if someday she would be able to tell her daughter who her father was, if someday she would have to listen to questions whose answers still hurt. "I don't want her to be ashamed of existing," she whispered to the wind one night. Charlotte heard her from afar, but didn't approach. She understood that certain pains need space to scream in silence. Meanwhile, Arthur searched for traces like an obsessive man. He hired a private investigator. He checked clinic names, searched records, tried to access her old email accounts. Nothing. It was as if Isabella had been erased from the system. Sometimes, he found himself staring at an empty crib in a baby store window, imagining if he would buy that same model, if she would have chosen something similar. He thought about names. He thought about what features she would have, and he hated himself for imagining a future he had lost, perhaps deservedly. Time, however, did not wait, and Isabella's belly grew. The baby kicked. She read books on natural childbirth, watched videos, and looked at everything with sunken eyes and fingers clenching pens until they almost broke. She was a mother in training, and a woman still in collapse. "You have to think about yourself too, not just the baby," Charlotte said one night, while making pancakes. Isabella smiled, tired, but the smile was an empty reflection. "I don't know where I am anymore, Char. I just know I have to get to the end. And after that, I have no idea." They ate in silence, as they did almost every day. That same night, Isabella wrote a letter. Not for Arthur, but for her daughter. "If someday you want to know the truth, I will tell you, but it will be in time. It will be when your heart is strong enough to understand that you don't just love those who do you good, that sometimes we also love those who hurt us, and that, even hurt, I decided to have you. For me. For you. For the good part of him that once existed." She put the letter in a locked drawer. The following week, she bought a second-hand crib. She painted it herself all weekend. It was white with yellow details. Her back ached, and at the same time, a thread of pride kept her going. That was what she did now. She survived in silence, carving out a new life from the pieces of the old one. And every heartbeat she heard on the ultrasound was a cruel and beautiful reminder that even in chaos, there was still something worth protecting. That Friday, the sky was dull, laden with clouds in no hurry to weep. It was the kind of day Isabella liked, cloudy enough to hide the world, quiet enough not to demand smiles. Her coffee shop uniform was already too tight, and back pain made her sit down between orders. But she disguised it. It was a safe routine, and she needed routine. She needed to pretend the world was predictable, even when everything inside her trembled with fear. Charlotte had left early. Job interviews in another neighborhood. She said she would be back by night. And Isabella, as always, didn't ask many questions. The silence between them was comfortable, like an old blanket, rough but familiar. Shortly after 3 p.m., the coffee shop filled with ordinary people. Tourists, students, mothers with strollers. It was a noisy but harmless environment. Nothing seemed about to collapse. Nothing suggested that time was about to stop. But it did. Arthur walked in without knowing where he was stepping. It was just a break in his routine. Between one meeting and another, one client and another. Just a coffee. He didn't even look at the name of the place. His mind was elsewhere, as always. Since the divorce, everything seemed gray. He ordered an espresso. He sat by the window. His phone vibrated with notifications he ignored, and it was at that precise instant, as he looked up out of boredom, that he saw her. Isabella, behind the counter, her back to him first, tying her hair into a messy bun, then turning with a tray in her hands, her tired eyes scanning the room. And then, their eyes met. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. She stopped. Literally. For a whole second, she stopped. The tray trembled. Her body froze. But what revealed everything most was her belly. Pregnant. Very pregnant. That lie, told with the coldness of someone trying to kill their own past, was now there. Alive. Grown. Inevitable. Arthur didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He just stared, as if he had seen a ghost. But it was real. Her belly was real. The eyes that avoided his were also real. The coffee-stained uniform, the name on the badge. Sarah. Even that had changed. Isabella looked away and turned quickly, heading to the back of the coffee shop. But the damage was already done. The entire world had collapsed in that second. Arthur stood up. He walked to the counter with slow steps, like someone treading on sacred ground. But she didn't come back. The barista, a young man with an intern's face, looked at him without understanding. "The girl who was here," Arthur said, his voice broken. "She had to step out. Do you want another coffee?" Arthur didn't answer. He walked out. He stood outside, leaning against the wall, his face covered with his hands, trying to understand if what he had just seen was real. Inside, Isabella trembled, leaning against the sink, her hands on her belly, as if she needed to protect what she had hidden for so long. Charlotte arrived an hour later. She found Isabella sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes open, but empty. "He saw me." Charlotte didn't need to ask who. She just sat beside her. "Did you talk to him?" "No, it just happened, as if time was waiting to collect everything." She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just spoke, like someone who has already accepted that the inevitable has arrived. "And now," Isabella fell silent. Her belly moved, and she placed her hand there, feeling the movement. It was as if the baby had also felt it, as if her body knew before her mind that the past had been found. Outside, Arthur stood for hours in front of the coffee shop. Then he walked aimlessly through the streets, feeling every step as an accusation. Her words came back like knives. "I lost the baby." The lie now had form, a name, and it was growing inside her. He didn't know what to do, whether to shout, whether to knock on the door, whether to flee. But a certainty pierced him completely. She lied to protect herself from him, and that truth hurt more than any betrayal. Arthur spent the next 2 days on the fringes of his own life. He slept poorly. He ate poorly. The image of Isabella behind the counter, with her round belly betraying what she had tried to hide, wouldn't leave his head. It was a memory that didn't need to be summoned. It came unbidden, invading, crushing. And with it came the pain, not only of having been excluded from a life, but of the reason why. He knew it. He didn't need her to say it aloud. She didn't trust him, and rightly so. On Wednesday afternoon, he returned to the coffee shop. He waited for hours across the street, not having the courage to go in. He watched every customer, every movement behind the glass, waiting for the right moment. But the right moment doesn't exist for those who are afraid. On Thursday, he tried again. This time, he didn't stand still. He went in. Isabella wasn't there. The colleague at the counter informed him, without knowing who he was, that she had been on sick leave since the beginning of the week. Something about high blood pressure. Arthur thanked her, swallowed his panic, and left. On Friday, he went to the building. He asked at the concierge desk for Sarah. The lady on the first floor said that was the name of the girl in apartment 304, but that she didn't like visitors. He didn't insist. He came back the next day, and the next, until, finally, it was Charlotte who saw him, standing across the street, his face pale and his soul in his eyes. "You're not going to stop, are you?" Her voice, firm, held no hostility, only weariness. "I can't," he replied. Charlotte analyzed him for a long second, the kind of gaze that doesn't measure beauty or friendliness, but sincerity. Then she took a step forward. She doesn't want to fight. She doesn't want drama. If you came to shout, dramatize, or threaten, you'd better leave. I didn't come for any of that. I just want to listen and ask for forgiveness if she allows it." Charlotte nodded, somewhat reluctantly. "Then come up. But be careful. She's fragile." The apartment smelled of anise and dust. Arthur entered with slumped shoulders and a racing heart. Isabella was on the sofa, covered with a thin blanket. When she saw him, she wasn't startled. She just looked at him. No drama, no surprise, as if she knew he would appear, sooner or later. He approached slowly, but didn't introduce himself. He waited. "You saw me, didn't you?" she began, her voice dry. "I saw you," he replied. "Blah. I thought I made it very clear, Arthur. I thought I wouldn't have to go through this. I didn't come to pressure you, or to demand anything. I just wanted to understand, or at least hear it from your mouth." Isabella took a deep breath. She looked towards the window. Then she turned her eyes back to him, and for the first time there was no anger in them, only an ancient weariness. "I didn't lose our daughter." Arthur felt the words fall in slow motion. He knew it, but hearing them was another thing. "I lied, because I couldn't trust, because everything in me screamed that I had to run, and because what I felt, still feel, is too great to be hurt again." He nodded, said nothing, just held her gaze, the same gaze that years ago she loved, and that now desperately tried to say it was still there. "I was afraid," she continued, "afraid you'd come back out of guilt, afraid of falling out of necessity, afraid of looking at you and reliving everything. The betrayal, the silence, the way you disarmed me and you didn't see it." She spoke in a low voice, like someone still bleeding, but without tears, like someone not seeking to convince, only to expose. "I spent entire nights awake trying to convince myself that you didn't deserve to know, that what was growing inside me was mine, only mine, and for a long time, that was enough for me." Arthur still didn't move. He was there, present, silent. "But it's not just mine, I know, and seeing you there, across the counter, made me realize how much it hurts to hide what is also yours, and I'm sorry for that." The word sorry came out of him like a whisper, almost a sob. "No, Arthur, I'm the one who should apologize for lying, but you owe me another for making me feel like I had to lie." His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. He just took a deep breath, and finally he sat down. "I didn't come to try to win you back, Isabella, nor to promise you worlds. I came because I want to be a father, because if you let me, I want to be here, wherever you are, every step of the way, in silence if necessary." She looked at him, and in that second, she saw something she didn't recognize, but it touched her. "Do you still live in London?" "I left there. I asked for a transfer. I'm working remotely, in a serviced apartment near here." "For me?" "For her," he replied, gently pointing to her belly. Isabella looked down. She smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "It's still too soon for me to trust again, but it's good to know you didn't run." "I ran my whole life, Bella. Me too. But I can't anymore." The silence that followed was not empty. It was welcoming. It was the kind of silence that precedes something good. Isabella adjusted the blanket over her legs. "You can come back tomorrow, if you want. I'm going to come back, every day, until you tell me to stop." She didn't reply. She just closed her eyes for an instant, and when she opened them, there was a trace of peace in them. Small, but real. Arthur left the apartment without asking for anything in return. He went down the 3 flights of stairs, his heart beating steadily, not fast. For the first time in months, there was no hurry, no urgency, there was decision. Clear. Solid. The next morning, he signed the contract for an apartment 6 blocks away. It had an open-plan kitchen, 2 small bedrooms, and a window that faced the afternoon sun. It was simple, but enough. He didn't want luxury. He wanted to be close. He adapted his work to remote. He was lucky. He was a systems analyst, a role he could perform from anywhere. It took him 2 days to set up his makeshift workstation in the living room, and 3 more to organize the rest of his life. And between video calls, he would look at his phone, waiting for a notification that didn't come. On Friday, at 11:45 at night, he was leaning against the low wall in front of the coffee shop. He wasn't smoking. He wasn't talking. He was just waiting. When Isabella came out, tired, her belly visibly heavier, and her face drawn from the exhaustion of her routine, he approached her calmly. "May I walk you home?" She looked at him for 2 seconds, long enough to gauge his intentions, and then she nodded. On the way, they didn't talk much. He carried her 2 bags, watched her press her shoes against the asphalt, and the effort with which she breathed on the inclines. At her door, he didn't ask to come in. He just handed her the bags. "Good night, Bella." She looked at him sideways. "See you tomorrow." And he left, without saying more, without promising anything. He came back on Saturday, and Sunday, and the following Monday, and then every day. In the second week, Isabella was already waiting for him, with a bottle of water in her hand, and a word she hadn't used in months. Thank you. It wasn't just for today. It was for everything. Arthur didn't talk about the past. He didn't talk about betrayal. He didn't talk about love. He just asked how she was, and he listened, and that, little by little, began to unsettle her. More than any apology, she started going to her appointments. At first, she hesitated, but then she allowed him. He sat by her side, watched the ultrasound images with tear-filled eyes. He didn't touch her. He didn't get too close. But he was present. And that presence, silent and constant, became something sacred. Charlotte observed everything from afar, like someone who doesn't want to interfere. One day, she sat with Isabella on the sofa, and in a low voice said, "You know he's different, don't you?" Isabella hesitated. "Yes, but I still don't know if that's enough." Charlotte smiled, with the patience of someone who has seen hell and returned. "No one knows, but what he's doing is rare." Isabella didn't reply. She put her hand on her belly, felt Lily's movement, as they had decided to call her, and closed her eyes. The baby moved more when he was near. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe not. In the third week, Arthur appeared with a newborn essentials kit. Diapers, creams, a book on postpartum care. He handed it over without ceremony. "If you don't want any of this, that's fine, but I thought it might help." Isabella didn't reject it. "Thank you, again. It's for her," he said. And it was. Everything was for her. Arthur started learning Lily's schedule, the quirks of the building, the days when Isabella's back pain worsened. He installed, without asking permission, a grab bar in her apartment bathroom. One day, he left a note on the door. "Sorry about the drilling. Thought it would help." She didn't complain. The following week, she asked him for help assembling the crib. He brought the tools. As he fitted the pieces, she watched him, silent from the bedroom door. He was the same man, but he wasn't. He was different, more attentive, more simple, as if he had understood that winning back isn't about invading, it's about staying. "I don't want you to think this changes everything," she said, as the last screw was tightened. "I know. We're still far from being anything. I know. But your being here helps me breathe." He smiled with his eyes, said nothing, put away the toolkit and left. The next day, he returned with special pregnancy pillows. Isabella started waiting for him without admitting it. Every night at 11 o'clock sharp, she pretended to be distracted, but she already knew that when she opened the door, he would be there. With some tea, a bag, or just the comfortable silence of someone who doesn't demand presence, only offers it. It was at the beginning of the 8th week that she said, "You can come in. A cup of tea won't kill anyone." He entered. In the kitchen, while the water boiled, she recounted her fear of childbirth, that she dreamed of her deceased mother, that sometimes she thought she wouldn't make it. And he listened. Again. With his soul. That night, when saying goodbye, he didn't touch her. He just said, "We're going to make it. Together or not. For her, we're going to make it." She closed the door carefully. She sat on the sofa and cried. But this time, it was a different cry. It wasn't grief. It was acceptance. It was the feeling that, perhaps, someone was willing to stay, without wanting anything beyond what had already been lost and rebuilt, without promising anything more than the present. Labor began without warning, on a suffocating February afternoon. Isabella was in the kitchen, preparing rice for dinner, when she felt the first real contraction. Not those fake ones that had been coming since week 32, but the one that brought certainty etched in her bones. It was now. She leaned against the sink, took a deep breath, stifled a scream, and called Charlotte, who was in the next room. Arthur was at the market, buying fresh fruit for the week, as he did every Monday. The waters broke 30 minutes later in the back seat of his car, as he sped through the narrow streets towards the hospital. Charlotte, beside her, timed the contractions between curses. And Isabella, she squeezed his hand, as if the pain could transfer by osmosis. "Breathe, Bella. Breathe with me, okay?" he said, maintaining a calm with a bravery he didn't even know he had. She didn't scream. She cried in silence, but in her eyes, the terror of someone about to cross into another world. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Nurses ran. The on-call doctor examined her and confirmed. She was in active labor. There was little time. Arthur didn't leave her side for a second. "I'm here. I swear, Bella, I'm here." She, between contractions, nodded. Nothing more. Hours later, in the dead of night, Lily's cry broke the room like a soft thunder. And it was Arthur who cried first, because it was her. It was real. She was theirs. Isabella, exhausted, sweaty, amidst tears and relief, looked to her side. She saw his hand holding hers tightly. She saw his tear-filled eyes, his trembling lips. And in that instant, she didn't see the man who had betrayed her. She saw the father of her daughter. He began, but his voice broke. "She's perfect." Isabella just smiled, a tired, pained, but full smile. He kissed her forehead. She didn't pull away. It was the end of an old pain, and the beginning of something else. In the following days, the hospital room became a refuge. Charlotte slept in a corner. She took care of everything. Arthur learned to change diapers, to bathe, to calm colic. He watched Isabella with the eyes of someone who finally understood. And she, at last, allowed herself to be watched. Upon being discharged, she said, "Let's go to your apartment." He didn't reply. He just took the suitcase and the baby's car seat. No party. No promises. The life of 3 began in silence. The routine settled in like a new language. Early morning feedings, diapers changed in the dark, cries interpreted by trial and error. He would get up first, make coffee, set the bathwater ready. She slept little, but knew she was no longer alone. And that, in itself, was love. They didn't sleep in the same room. Not yet. She stayed with Lily in the small bedroom, he on the sofa in the living room. But every night after the last feeding, they would sit together on the balcony, she with the baby in her arms, he beside her, holding one of the baby's tiny hands. "She has your nose," he said one night, "and your expression when she's hungry. So she's lost," he joked. She laughed. For the first time in a long time. In the early hours of Lily's 34th day of life, a fine rain was falling. Isabella got up to prepare the bottle. Arthur was in the living room, wide awake, reading on his phone how to deal with night colic. She entered slowly, Lily in her arms, her eyes still red from sleep. He got up, took the bottle, and tested the temperature on his inner wrist. She watched him. "Thank you for all this." He didn't reply. He just nodded. Lily ate in his lap. Isabella watched, standing, leaning against the kitchen door, her hair disheveled, her nightgown stained with milk. She looked shattered. "And beautiful. You're good at this," she said. "I try, and you're doing it." The silence between them was full, alive, vibrant. When he got up to put Lily in her crib, she didn't move away as he passed. And when he returned, she was still there. Her face illuminated only by the lamp, her gaze calm. "Arthur, She didn't speak. She just approached. Slowly, like someone treading on ancient yet renewed ground. He waited. He didn't touch her. He didn't demand. He just waited, and then she kissed him. Without warning, without logic, without a precise moment. It was a long, serene kiss. A kiss that didn't ask for forgiveness, only presence. A kiss from someone who still loves, but now, with different eyes. "This doesn't change everything," she said when they separated. "But it changes something." He nodded. "We're not the same anymore, thankfully." They stood there, embracing, listening to Lily's breathing from the next room. The world didn't need to know. Not yet. Because this love that was being reborn now wasn't made of euphoria. It was made of choice, of surrender. It wasn't perfect, but it was love. And this time, it was meant to grow, along with their daughter. If this story touched your heart, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes that love, even wounded, can still be reborn. Comment below, would you forgive? And if it were you, would you have told the truth? Activate the bell so you don't miss any upcoming stories, because here, every pain has a voice, and every new beginning, a space to flourish.